We have a guest in studio, Davis Kambale Tayo. Thank you very much for joining us. You're an economic empowerment advisor. What does that entail?
Thank you for having me, Tom, and good evening, Kenyans. We saw a gap in the whole economic empowerment discussion and initiatives in the country. We have a situation where we have many women and the youth and persons with disabilities, looking for opportunities to economically empower themselves. Then on the other side, which technically we want to call the supply side, you have the government with the AGPO program, which reserves 30% procurement opportunities to them. And we have other private sector initiatives also, which are affirmative in nature. And the problem we saw was there's a low absorption of these opportunities. And we dug deeper to see what is missing. And we saw there's a lot of capacity that needs to be created amongst the intended beneficiaries. And this is not just normal training. It's real practical capacity building. How do you register a company? How do you make it compliant? How do you apply for tenders? How do you look for opportunities? How do you apply for financing from the Youth Fund, the Women Enterprise Fund,
and so on and so
forth? Yes.
And I believe that your area of focus would be in the younger demographic. Certainly. The 18-year-olds, the 20, 25,
certainly,
all the way to 30. I watched a certain gubernatorial debate that was held in Nairobi, and there was a 25-year-old fella who really struck me like he has a lot of potential in the future.
Very true.
Would your empowerment include, picking people like that who have a future in the political space and guiding them and steering them towards their true north?
Yes, in the sense that as you actualize your ambition, there's a lot that is required. The so-called soft skills, the so-called linkages, and this thing we demonize called experience. It's an important thing. Maybe it has been overstretched to curtail some progress in some areas, but all these three things are very important. And so when you find somebody with a passion to move in a certain direction, in
politics,
in which, yes, in professional career paths, people talk about mentorship and all that. So there's that bit that is required in these other, aspirations, business and those kind of things.
I asked that because I know our topic of discussion tonight is the political parties funding. And if you go back, even before we promulgated the new constitution, there's a way we did our politics. There's a way we funded our politics. And then later on we saw the political parties for funding act come into place. But I'm just wondering, what do you think necessitated that act? Because we were doing politics even prior to that.
I still remember being sent by my parents to pay the subscription fee for KANU. Then the KANU card was almost synonymous with the national ID. And I think that was one way of the parties then, raising funds through membership contributions. And it's a good thing because parties don't work for themselves. They represent the aspirations of the members. And I think the new regulations that have come, some have seen the light of day, some have been thwarted, were meant to bring transparency in the whole political party funding sphere. And we've also seen that there's the involvement of government itself in funding political parties which have succeeded in having, the aspirants winning elective posts in various positions, and we saw this play out in the leading political parties, and the big figures, in billions. And the question then begs, how should we then start interrogating the use of these funds? Yes, both from government and from special interest groups.
Yeah, exactly. And you talked about, in fact, the Treasury, I think, released 350 million to Jubilee, and another 165 million to ODM.
Yes.
Okay. And you remember the tiff that was there between ODM and the Wiper Party? I believe they may have resolved that matter.
Yes,
but the question is there a framework, that protects the smaller parties? Okay, from what we saw.
I would
Wiper go through.
I would say this fund, just to use a layman's term, is almost like a reward for the winning parties, and the reward is meant to facilitate them to go back to the people who elected them, and actualize the manifestos in one way or another, and also get feedback from these people who elected them as to what they need the government to be doing. I haven't seen a lot of that, but of course, when you see a lot of party activities across the country, I think the top 4 or 5 parties which are in government now, and they are leading in various aspects, have offices across the country. Wherever there is an issue which has some form of national importance, you will get comments from party representatives from far-flung areas. That is evidence of how that money is being used, just to boost the whole aspect of public participation, citizen participation in the aspect of governance. But we need to go much further and start thinking about creating a pipeline of leaders using these funds, so that when we approach elections, it's not a time of people, trying to go into elective positions as retirement plans. But every party should have developed a pipeline of leaders, and I'm talking about the young people, I'm talking about women, I'm talking about the PWDs who should have been members, and they are now graduating into now the elective positions after having been taken through the ideologies of the party, how government works, so that it's an incubation program for future leaders.
So you turn it into a career of sorts?
Yes. Politics is a career. It shouldn't be a chancing game. It's not a bet. And we've seen, people heartbroken because they left some plum positions thinking that they can, because they have some savings, they can go and try it out. The citizens are starting to learn who is a leader in that sense. So if you come from, wherever you came from, just to be a leader, I mean, we've seen, I don't want to mention names, but we've seen people who have really been surprised by the outcome of, and people will take your money. I mean, they will take it.
They'll take it.
But come the day of voting, even from the nomination stage to the real election stage, people have been disappointed.
You talk of money matters. I mean, let me take you to the US. And you remember the model and approach that President Obama, adapted, where he was actually getting money directly from
the small donors.
The small donors, the $1, the $10.
Yes.
If you look at that horizon, are there any lessons that we can learn? Can we, other than just relying on government cash, is there a way people can get out and now become innovative and hand over to those opportunities to contribute to the party, to the membership at the grassroots?
There's a saying that he who pays the piper
calls the tune.
And that applies in politics. And it's not bad in itself, because politics is about interests. So in any society, you'll have people who you'll call the special interest persons. And in the context of the US, and let's talk specifically about the health, reforms that Obama was able to achieve. Health is big business. So you have the big pharma and the big hospitals who really want a certain type of health financing. Then you have Obama, who thought, I want a financing model which is almost akin to what we're trying to do in this country, the universal health coverage, which is pro-poor and almost taking away business from the big boys.
From the more established.
Yes. So nothing wrong in what everyone is trying to do, but because now Obama was able to get a lot of support, more than 50% in both the initial run and the rerun, then he was freed from the shackles of the special interest groups in Washington, and he was able to push through the Obamacare, which is a landmark, financing framework, and which we can learn a lot about. And he was successful in that sense. So the small donations, participation by the citizens, not only in voting, but in financing the parties, then emboldens the parties to fight for, very strong pro-poor, very strong empowerment programs, which don't necessarily support big businesses, but they really support the people who are supporting, who are financing this party. And this time we're talking about the citizens.
The citizens. If you look at even, the fact that government allocates a certain amount of money to the political parties, it looks very enticing to the smaller so-called briefcase parties.
Yes.
And what do you see? A proliferation of those. How do you check that without necessarily disadvantaging you?
I think it's okay to have as many parties as possible, because it's our right. It's a political right.
It's there in the Constitution.
Yes. So let's go defend our manifestos and get people to vote for us. So I see no problem in having many parties. The thing is, the parties need to represent a certain ideology. And that ideology endears you to the people who should support you, including financing you, because there's a lot of visibility right now to all these parties. If a party is successful in fielding a gubernatorial candidate or a presidential candidate, you have a national platform. So if you have a party promoting, say, GMOs, then you have a national platform to prosecute that agenda. If you have a party which is green, promoting issues about climate change and all that, and you have candidates and they are now on this national platform, then you have an opportunity to prosecute those particular issues, and that then endears you to the special interest groups, which will come forward and say, Tom, if this is your party and this is what you're pushing for, then we will fund you. And there's nothing wrong. Legally, the Elections Act allows parties to get support from.
That when you're talking, I was reminded of how Wangari Maathai branded herself around the question of forests. And the fight against the destruction of forests. But let me ask you this: do you see an interplay between political party financing and the participation of women in politics? Not necessarily as a special interest group, but is there a nexus between political party funding and
there's a nexus,
a spike in the number of women?
I'll tell you some things which point to that kind of thinking, even within political parties. The nomination fees, for example, for women were much lower. There are some who are very aggressive, they were actually telling them, come, for women we are not charging anything. For a political party to undertake that kind of preferential fees for women, there's nothing for free. It costs. To do anything, there's a cost. So if I tell you I'm giving you a 50% discount, somebody else has paid that 50%. So the funding of these political parties actually helps the whole affirmative agenda, because one of the reasons why these so-called affirmative groups have not been able to participate is because of funding. So if you have a bright person like the one you were talking about, and you see this person just needs a platform, you should then accommodate them and be able to, you know, sponsor them, if I may use that word, within the finances of the party. So it's very important that, you know, the winning parties continue to get funding from government, and let's be more vocal, let's more transparency be shown on how these funds are used, and let's talk more of politics as a career, so that we encourage the young people to join. It's good to be a member of a party. So choose a party which you identify with, it resonates with your ambition and you know, ideologies, and grow in that party. And let the parties then mentor these people, use the funds to take them to, you know, all these benchmarking, leadership, exposure, you know, the bunge la mwananchi, these kind of things, so that when we are approaching general elections, every party should have a pipeline of aspirants who have been schooled in the party, you know, policies and ideologies, and it should be just a natural progression. To the rest.
I mean, it sounds good for the year. Is it something that we can achieve in the near future? Do you think we're there, by the way?
I think I should ask that. There are signs of that. Because party hopping has cost people in this election. It hasn't been very possible to hop from one place to another. There's a saying in Swahili, people say that chama iko na wenyewe. So we need to strengthen that let's belong. Let us belong, so that as we mature as a democracy, then every party should have a real identity. People should be able to identify with a certain party without thinking of jumping ship if they don't win a nomination
on this party.
Yes.
Okay. Tell me, how do you think, when you look at the horizon, how do you think the political party funding has transformed the political landscape in Kenya?
To a sense, we have entrenched the winner, take it all and keep it all. Because if as a party you did well and you received hundreds of millions from the political funding framework, then you already have a head start over any other party which has not benefited from those kind of funds. So we really need to think hard and see how then do we promote the smaller parties. There's still some work to be done on the element of public participation. Is there an opportunity in considering political parties as stakeholders in all public participation engagements? And if that then becomes a framework of, you know, consideration, then can some funding then be released to each and every registered political party within a framework for them to execute or prosecute some critical public policy issues? Because, you know, having elected MPs or whoever will be elected doesn't stop other special interest groups from talking and adding value to the national dialogue on anything that is happening. So that these parties should be active all through. Should have a, you know, in football, you have the reserve bench running around the field, warming up. Maybe they don't get a chance to play, but we kind of see them, and it plays out to even motivate the ones who are playing. The ones who are playing know that if I get hurt, there's somebody who will quickly come on board, and those kind of things.
But the one who's warming up, he has an aspiration of getting onto the pitch. And, you know, and playing.
But
we keep seeing political parties making their strategic choices on, for instance, candidate X.
Yeah.
When, if you look at even the nomination process at the grassroots, the majority of the people at the base have a preference.
Yeah.
And so you end up having a party candidate, but not the people's candidate.
Yeah.
And the follow-up question would be then reconciliation.
Yeah. And that's why I said earlier that let's have as many parties as possible, but we need to graduate from that to have issue-based formations or parties. And I like the other option of the independence. And it calls for really a genuine heart within the leaders. When you are saying democracy is for the people, of the people, by the people, you need to respect the choice of the people. But what usually happens is, because the party needs support, money, then the rich, the more influential, the person who was supporting the party is rewarded with that nomination certificate. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but when people have their objectives in whatever they are doing, and that's why we're saying that let all parties be considered going forward. We need to think hard as a country on how do we facilitate all these small parties so that they become avenues of public participation, public engagement. Even if they don't win, a seat in the National Assembly or the County Assembly, let them be facilitated to undertake some, engagements with elected leaders. Let them be, schools of developing future leaders. It's not easy to register a party. Hats off to anyone who has registered a party. It's a hard thing.
It's a difficult thing.
It's a difficult thing.
But we also have history where we've seen people have run on independent tickets.
Yes.
They've bolted out of the bigger machines that are well oiled with good kitty. Yeah. And they've gone and won elections.
Winning is something else, but governing is another thing. Leadership, political leadership it's a team effort. You cannot be a lone ranger. So you can win the election, but after that, you must be part of a team, because you need support. Yeah. You need members of parliament to support you. You need county assembly, the MCAs to support you. You need to marshal support if you're sponsoring a bill. So it can't be that you can be the choice of the people, but with good ideas. But now to execute those ideas, you must work with other people. Yeah. And that's why you see sometimes most independents, once they prove the point to the parties that didn't give them the nomination, eventually they look at back. Yeah, they go back to the party and they are accommodated. Yes.
Tell me one thing.
Yeah.
Do you think that political parties have lived up to the role of being credible institutions of democracy, of change, institutions that impact the lives of those people who vote for them?
Everything, yes, but democracy.
Why? Why not democracy?
The nomination exercise, which just ended, was very acrimonious. Very many allegations of, whatever people are calling the scientific method. People were measured or assessed in a boardroom somewhere, and you're called and you're told, we think so-and-so is more popular than you, so please stand down for that kind of a thing. So on the democratic space within parties, I think we still have some work to do. But every other thing, I think the parties have really tried to make sure that, issues to do with their membership, and here we're talking about the people voting these parties and their representatives into office, they've really been vocal in trying to push the agenda of these particular people.
If you look at even the 4 presidential aspirants, Professor Wajakoya, Dr. William Ruto, David Mboya, and Right Honorable Raila Odinga.
Yes.
How can we see more, younger people throwing their hearts at that level of political, leadership through the party mechanism? So that we see, yes, the more established, the bigger boys, but we begin to see the younger faces coming in.
I think all these parties you've mentioned have the Youth League, the Women League, and these leagues become more visible, during elections. It's strategic, it works. So the call then is to make these structures more permanent.
And I ask that for the simple reason of continuity.
Yes, and if these leagues are more permanent, then we start within the parties a mechanism of mentoring the young people or the marginalized populations into mainstream politics. Of course, it calls to loyalty. It calls for we as Kenyans, when you join a party, and as I said, politics is a career, stick to your lane, stick to the lane, and your time will come. It will come because you will be ready. You will be ready. You will have been, you have proved yourself within the party. You have been patient. You have been seen by the leaders that are in office, and in due time they will usher you in, because with time they also have to step out. Yes.
Okay, so one last question that I would like to ask you is career or a retirement place? I know you talked about it.
Yes.
I mean, how do we make it cool? How do we see more younger people saying, I want to go into politics because I have a transformative agenda for the people? Is that something that we should also be thinking about? How to... I mean, look, Kenya is predominantly an agricultural country.
Yes.
And you find that if you look at the people who are in that space, they are the slightly mature part of society. So the younger ones are shy. They don't want to take up agriculture. And we're not seeing them in their numbers in positions of leadership. They're there. They're there. But how do you make it cool? Something to aspire for early.
I think just looking around, most of the people we call national leaders have been leaders of student movements in universities and colleges. That should be an indicator that politics is not about being an MP or a senator or a governor. Wherever you are, there are sector associations. Seek leadership positions in all those associations so that you grow, so that when you come into now the mainstream leadership, political leadership as we call it, then you have a constituency which is supporting you. Then the adage that politics should be a career becomes starts to make sense, because you are going up the ladder to make national policies, and you will want to influence the national policy in a way that supports where you came from. If you're a sports person, if you're an agricultural person, if you are a banker like I was, if you are an engineer, you'll then be able to add value at the national level in terms of policies regarding your origin.
Okay. You've spoken about support. How do we support these political parties so that they can thrive?
We need to encourage Kenyans to support the parties they belong to. And of course that starts with becoming a member of a party. Let's be members of the parties we love in terms of the ideologies and all those kind of things. And number two, support your party. We go to churches, we go to various places of worship, and we support these institutions. The political parties, when they take power, they determine a lot about our lives. So let's support them. And when we support these parties, then we free them from the special interest groups who are also seeking, ends in terms of political, favors or policy and those kind of things. And we will have emboldened our leaders to do things that really support us as citizens, instead of being, pushed around by special interest groups. Yeah.
Okay. There's a story here that my colleague Gladys Mungai, that we aired a little earlier, about candidates calling for political tolerance.
Yes.
All right. Yeah. We're seeing monies being given to the youth to go and cause mayhem, trouble, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about the tolerance index as we are heading towards the general election, and whether a time has come for, because when you talk of finance and you have a strong background in finance, then there has to be a sense of audit.
I think
we don't end up using monies to fund rowdiness.
There was an attempt to bring order in the whole funding, political funding, space, especially for the aspirants and the parties, how they raise funds and all that. And IBC, threw in some regulations, proposed some regulations, but they didn't see light of day. Those regulations will have really helped, because there was an aspect of tracking the source and the use of these funds. That would have helped. But where we are now, I think we'll just need to encourage our enforcement agencies to do what they can. They have succeeded in the past in tracing the sources of, funds which have been used to fuel violence. I think they just need to do what they always do. I mean, most of these monies are distributed. People take videos. Some are sent through M-Pesa. Tracing those kind of things should be something which, the professionals can do.
I mean, that auditing mechanism was a good one.
It was.
Why do you think it fell flat on its own weight?
I think you know the answer, but it's just that the goodwill by our leaders to empower the citizens, to bring transparency in financial matters, the fact that maybe some of the sources of these funds are not, what anyone would be proud of, that might have, fueled all those kind of that opposition to that regulation. But I think at some point it has to happen. The future is bright. People are more keen on clean elections. People are more keen on integrity. And I think it's coming, and it should be a lot to contend with. The same way we are seeing the Chapter 6 has started to bite in one way or another. So even on the financing side, I think a time will come when it will bite.
Okay. I think just a few days before we go to vote.
Yes.
And you've spoken about political hygiene. Amongst the political actors as we head towards the election. When you look into the horizon, what are you seeing? And as a parting shot, what would be your strongest message to the people who are watching, the potential voters, even as they prepare to cast their vote?
I think whichever way the election goes and whoever wins, the citizen is the winner. The citizen is the winner because for the first time, We are seeing the convergence of issues. What does the country need? What do we need to do for the Kenyan down there, in the middle, and up there? Issues to do with the economy. Each and every candidate is talking about these issues. So that convergence has happened. And whoever goes in has a duty to deliver solutions to these particular issues. So I think as a country we have won in mainstreaming issues, and slowly this will move towards values, because we shouldn't be in a space where we are arguing about issues. The issues should unify us. We should all say we want the affordable healthcare, we want easy access to education. So the question should be how. And whoever goes in and has power should be able to be audited on the basis of what have you done to deliver on the aspirations of the people as regards these particular issues. So I would say, as I look at the horizon, I look at it now, Kenyans have won. There's a lot of pressure to deliver on anyone running for office. Hakuna mambo ya kuregarega. There's pressure to deliver.
There's pressure
to deliver.
Yes. I think that's a good place. You have summarized it very well. Yep. Convergence of issues becomes at the center of this election. What does the country need?
Yeah. So it's a competition of ideas. Who can we trust?
Yeah.
What's the best idea?
Yeah.
And now we need to bring in a mechanism of ensuring that whatever is promised is delivered.
Is delivered.
Yes.
Why? Because of a history that we have?
Of course.
All right.
Promises have not been kept.
Yeah. I like the way you summarized it, that the voter is the one who will win.
Yes.
And the country is the one that will lose.
Yeah.
The spirit of darkness will lose, but the country will win.
The country will win, the voters will win. The people who get the job, let me call it the job, have a job to do.
They have a job to do.
Because we know what we want. And we just need it done.
You just need it done.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming through.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for honoring our invitation. Davis, Kambale, Tayo.
Asante.
The last one is very important.
Very important.
An economic empowerment advisor. Thank you so much for giving us those deep insights. And well, that's all we had time for. We want to thank you also for watching. My name is Mboya, and I'm wishing you a good night from Nairobi, Kenya. Good night. Bye-bye.